Greetings, traveller. I'm Tom Elliott, podcaster, and most of you will probably already know me from my extensive canon of award-winning podcasts. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about tonight. No, dear friends. Tonight I'm going to talk to you about a podcast that was so radical, so risky, and so dangerous that the episodes can only be broadcast several months apart for fear of inflicting permanent damage upon the listeners. But the question that I'm asked most of all about this most deadly and strange of shows is, how did it begin? How did two podcasting titans first meet and decide to make this legendary audio experience? Well, friend, tonight that secret can be told. So please, take a seat by the fire as I take you back to a Christmas Eve many moons ago, when this most poorly scheduled of podcasts began. And of course, that show was The Strange and Deadly Show. Oh, I wonder who that could be.
Oh, hello, you the new butler?
Well, it's been a long time since I've been the new anything.
Oh, what's happened to Hudson?
I guess he's changing.
Yeah, he does that a lot, doesn't he? I'm Chris Clayton, I live down the road.
Oh.
Yeah, Sir Percival lets me use his Blu-ray player when he's not around. He's not around, is he?
I can honestly say I haven't seen him, but come on in.
But,
Come on in.
Are you related to Sir Percival?
Well, distantly.
Oh, you're not the poor relation from Liverpool, are you, son?
Gee, news sure travels fast, doesn't it? I'm Tom.
Oh, pleased to meet you. You're the one that podcasts, right?
Well, right or wrong, I podcast either way.
Oh, well, I podcast too.
Oh, good. What kind of podcasting?
Nah, mostly the contemporary stuff. Do you like modern horror movies?
Oh, I think they're marvellous. Some of them are really fine. But tell me, have you ever watched any of the older fellows?
Oh, yeah, sure. I like John Carpenter and the other one, Lucio Fulci.
You go that far back, huh?
Yeah, I'm not as young as I look.
None of us is these days. Do you go in for any of the traditional things in the Clayton household at Christmas time?
Oh, yeah, most of them, really, son. Yeah, presents, a tree, decorations, cocaine binges and prostitutes.
What?
I was just seeing if you were paying attention. Actually, I do most of the things other people do. We watch the same movies.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I even have a watch of Christmas Evil.
Oh, you do, huh?
And this is my favourite. Do you know this one?
Oh, I do indeed. It's a lovely thing.
Oh, ho, 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 ho. Merry Christmas, everybody. My goodness, we actually got to Christmas after, well, a terrible year, let's be honest, for many of us. We're here, I can't believe it. Here I am in this lovely stately home with you, Tom. I've known you for such a long time now, I've been coming here for years. I remember turning up on your doorstep. You didn't know me, I didn't know you. I was asking for Percival. Don't know where he is. He's never turned up since, Tom. Is he under the floorboards?
I think he is. Merry Christmas, Chris. It's good to have you back in this stately home that I live in.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. How did you get the money for this? Is this the Twilight Zone money?
Yeah, it's all that Patreon money just rolling in.
You've got too big for your boots, but hey, it's very nice to be here. Thank you very much for the aperitifs as well. I really enjoyed those. The the cube of cheese on the end of the toothpick.
Yeah,
I really love those, and the cocktail sausages as well. I really like those, and we've got some there. If any guests should turn up, I hope not, Tom, because I did say let's not tell anybody about this. Let's just have it be me and you, the dynamic duo. We've been gunning for a long time now, you and I, 13, 14 years or so, maybe even 20. Who knows? Who knows? But yes, hello, listeners. Merry Christmas to you. I think at the end of this whole experience, maybe we'll have a little summary of the year in a way that's not going to depress anybody. I think that would be a good thing to do. But for now, hey, come on in, come and sit with us, enjoy some finger foods. Tom's over. He's got some cherry bakewells over there. Tell you what, though, you stay away from those because those are mine. Those are mine. You know me, Tom. I'm a fiend for a cherry bakewell, and I'm a fiend for a mince pie. What sort of Christmas food do you like around this time?
Oh, I like it all. I'm a big fan. A nice cheese plate, something like that. Some cold meats and all those kind of things. I love it all. Some boozy mince pies.
Yeah, a bit of beef, mate. Get a bit of beef in you. And, of course, you love a good tipple as well. You're a fan of the tipple. So what's your tipple of choice around the Christmas, the festive period?
Well, every year I try and get like a nice bottle of something, whether it's like a single malt or something like that. And I always have the best of intentions. I think, you know what? I'll make that last over Christmas and just have a little snifter every now and again. But you know the way it goes. I open that bottle and I wake up fully clothed the next day on the couch and most of the bottle's gone. But, it wouldn't be Christmas without that.
I know. I mean, I don't want to invade your privacy, Tom, but I had to climb over a mountain of bottles to even get in here. Like, it's obscene what's happening. And it goes back to the old days of, the gentleman's grindhouse when many of us would hear you pouring yourself a nice bit of bubbly in the background. And I used to make fun of you for it because I could hear that glasping and I always knew that's Tom. That's Tom just pouring away. And hey, good luck to you, buddy. I think this year especially, we've all needed a bit of a drink, haven't we? And a chance to escape from the things that have been happening, but in a healthy way, I think.
Absolutely. I think we have all earned a nice Christmas drink this year. So cheers to you, my friend.
Thank you very much, sir. Here, clink, clink. That is the sound effect of the glass hitting another glass, folks. I don't know if you know, but got a side business in sound effects now. Doing a good job. Remember that guy out of Police Academy? He always make those noises with his mouth. Yeah? Well, that's me now. I'm that guy. I can't remember his name. But anyway, Tom, what better a way for two people who've known each other for a good long while to celebrate than to sit down together on a nice couch in front of a lovely fire and watch two masterpieces, Tom, of the horror genre. That is what we do here, of course, because this is a podcast dedicated to the Section 3 list, which is a selection of films related to Britain's video nasties. And, of course, we always do a double bill. By the way, if you're hearing this, you've just found it somewhere. You don't know where it was. How did I stumble upon this? Well, you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, any good podcatcher, really. If you search for The Strange and Deadly Show, you'll find us on there. And it usually comes up under the name Tom Elliott. I'm not part of it. Don't know why. Pretty sure I was part of that show, Tom, but for some reason my name's not there as well.
I have no idea.
But it's fine, Tom. It's absolutely fine. I'm only kidding.
I think you've been cancelled. I think someone found something you've said in an old Strange and Deadly show.
Probably. I think I know. It was probably Andrew Roberts because I'm onto him. And he probably thought, I better get rid of this guy before he outs me as being a terrific pervert. But yes, Tom, we've got a double bill up ahead here. And it's a theme that's based on psychopaths and serial killers. And yes, why don't you tell us about that double bill?
Well, nothing says Christmas more than two people murdering a lot of people. I think we shot our Christmas wads quite early in the run of the Strange and Deadly show. I think there's only really Christmas Evil on the list, isn't there? That's actually a Christmas movie. I don't know.
Yes, I think so. I mean, we did pair Christmas Evil with something else, didn't we? But I can't remember what that was. or if it was
Yeah.
Christmas related or not. But yes, Christmas Evil was the one, really, and we both really enjoyed that film at the time.
Yeah, we should have saved it, and we might be watching that instead of these masterpieces. But they fit together quite well as a double bill. I think 2 movies about guys who go around killing people. They're not supernatural killers; they are just ordinary serial killers, like you and me, just ordinary guys. But they kill people, and we don't.
What?
Apart from Sir Percival, of course.
Yeah, of course. No, he's long gone, mate. And I tell you what, I left a good trail of bodies in my wake by the time I got here. I've got no mercy anymore. This is what's happened, Tom. I'm going around slaying the coronavirus. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm going around. I'm like, ha ha ha, die. And so that's what's been happening. That's all I've been doing really for most of the year. Never mind all that, Tom. Let's get on with talking about these wonderful films, these cinematic classics. And we begin with a film called Bloodsong. Now, this was released in 1982. I'm going to take charge on this one, Tom. Also known as Nothing at All. I couldn't find an alternative title for Bloodsong. It was directed by Alan J. Levi, and it stars Donna Wilkes, Frankie Avalon, William Kirby Cullen, and Lenny Montana, who played Luca Brasi in The Godfather. I believe he played the skipper in this, among many others. Let's give you the synopsis of this one. As a child, Paul Foley witnesses the suicide of his father, who arrives home from work to find his wife in bed with another man, and he shoots them dead before turning the gun on himself. Paul, though shocked, begins playing the flute his father gifted him for comfort. We flash forward many years later and meet Marion, a young girl recently injured in an accident, who is having a hard time at home with her strict and overprotective father. She sees a local boy named Joey, who her father greatly disapproves of. But more worryingly, she's been seeing visions recently of an adult man killing people, but she doesn't know who he is. As it turns out, the man is the grown-up Paul Foley, who escapes from a psychiatric hospital and begins leaving a trail of bodies behind him. He's particularly annoyed at anyone who takes issue with his flute, which he still plays for comfort. Marion becomes more distressed as she sees these visions until she happens to come across Paul burying the body of a woman he picks up and killed. This cements the link between the two of them, which, as it transpires, is because Marion had a blood transfusion after her accident and the blood happened to come from Paul Foley. Makes sense.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The penny drops.
The penny drops, Tom. It happens all the time, Tom. So begins a frantic game of cat and mouse as Paul sets his eyes on the woman who caught him in the act.
What's the matter?
I saw something yesterday, and this time it was no dream.
What are you talking about?
That man I told you I dreamt about, I saw him. I mean, I really saw him. He was wearing a body. I know it was a body.
Where?
Just above Beck's Beach. Joey, I saw him, and he saw me, and he started to chase... You don't believe me either. But I know what I saw yesterday.
Did you call the sheriff?
Sheriff? My own folks don't believe me. Why should he?
Mayor, don't you think that this whole thing could be in your imagination?
That man is following me. I know he is.
I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for it.
Yeah, there is. There's this crazy man out there.
Mayor, will you slow down?
No, you don't believe me either. You're just like my folks.
What do you want me to do about it?
Come to Beck's Beach with me. Right now, and I'll prove it to you.
Okay, now Tom, we sort of have a slightly new way of doing these reviews going forward, which is that before I would ask you for a summary, how you felt about the movie, which kind of gives away your opinion right from the very beginning. I'm not saying you can't do that as you go through the review, because your tone and sort of the way that you do things is going to be pretty obvious as you discuss a movie. But rather than do that, we're going to kind of handle it a little bit similarly to how you do on Television Terror, where we sort of start at the beginning of the movie and kind of go through and summarise as we go rather than give it all away at the beginning. But I need to make one exception here and ask you a question. And that is, in your horror-loving life, did you ever feel that in order to feel truly complete, you needed an early 80s slasher movie starring a legendary pop singer who plays a psychopath with a flute.
I was going to start off with something similar. So let's say, me and you are sitting around as we do, and I say to you, Chris, I'm going to write a horror movie. And you say to me, oh, great. Is it going to be about a killer? And I say, of course it is. And you say, is he going to have claws for fingers? No. Has he got a mask? Is he like immortal? No. It's Frankie Avalon with a flute. So first off, this opening scene, the kid walks in after his dad has just killed his mum and he'll love it, and then he kills himself. And the kid, bless him, I'm not saying it's nice, and of course if you had a flute and you saw something like that, you would play it. You would play that flute.
Definitely. Yeah, I would.
But he's like, oh no, what are you doing? Bang, bang, bang. I didn't expect it, Chris. I'll be honest, I didn't expect it. What about you?
No, of course I didn't expect it. Who plays a flute after they've just witnessed their mother and lover being killed, and then the father committing suicide? And you think, I know what I need. I don't need to run away. I shouldn't cry. I shouldn't call the police. What I should do is play my flute. And that's what it's the Frankie Avalon flute movie. That's what we're going to get. And that took me completely by surprise. I've got to be honest with you, Tom, I did laugh. I did have a chuckle. Because I rewound it. I say you don't really rewind these days, do you? You sort of track skip or scan back or whatever. I scanned back and rewatched it again because I just couldn't quite believe what I was seeing. The explanation of it as we go through the movie, of course, is that this was a gift from this man's father, and he's very protective over it, too protective over it. And let's be honest, Tom, like it is, when he plays it, it is incredibly irritating.
Yes,
it's not a nice sound.
It's not. It's like the ugliest flute I've ever seen. It's like a big square piece of wood with about 3 holes in it.
Yep.
And whenever he plays it, he just looks ridiculous. And it's like when you're a kid, like every kid in England or in the UK, I think, played the recorder in primary school because it's the most affordable musical instrument there is. Just drill some holes in a bit of wood, give it to a kid and say, there you go, play that. So I kept expecting him to play Three Blind Mice on it or something like that. But unfortunately he didn't.
Well, he only knows one song, so that doesn't help. But also, when he plays it, it's really shrill. And it's just an awful sound. I don't blame everybody he meets in this movie for being really annoyed by it. Fine. Yeah. Choke me to death if you want, Frankie. I don't care. I'm annoyed by it. I'd rather die than listen to you play that fucking thing. But so right from the off, we get the sense that this young boy has been traumatized, and of course he's ended up in a psychiatric hospital because he's been traumatized by the events that he saw. And he's in that psychiatric hospital, makes an escape from it, of course, in quite a Michael Myers-ish type fashion. I feel like this movie, Tom, is quite inspired by Halloween.
It does take some cues from it, doesn't it? The murder at the beginning, if you'd have put a flute in Halloween, same film. I mean, do you think he'd been able to fit that flute through the mouth hole of his mask? Maybe a clarinet then. I don't know.
Maybe he could have played an accordion, Tom. I'd have liked that.
You don't need to put to your mouth.
Bring a bit of circus to the Halloween franchise. That's what I say. But he escapes from there, and of course we flash forward to the young Marion, played by Donna Wilkes, who I didn't know that much about, Tom. Apparently she's done quite a lot of stuff.
She was in Halloween 2, actually.
What? Who did she play in Halloween 2?
I don't know. Was she one of the nurses or something?
Maybe.
I'm not too sure. I can't remember.
Yeah, perhaps so. Because when I looked at her face, I thought, I think I have seen you in other stuff before, but probably one of those character actors that you see here and there. And living at home, not a very nice father, strict father, bit of a prick. And all she wants to do is live her life and be a teenager and be in love with her boyfriend Tom, but she's got her prick of a father. He's overprotective. He does love her, but he's overprotective. And there's a maniac on the loose as well.
I mean, there's a lot going on in her little life, isn't there? Bless her. She's got she's got a sort of caliper thing on her leg because she was in a car accident with her dad, and her boyfriend seemingly lives on a boat. Is he a fisherman or something? And he just keeps going away and coming back again.
He does, doesn't he?
You know, she'll go to the jetty, and he'll come back, and he's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And then he'll go away again. So it's a very strange relationship.
It is a strange one. The skipper of the boat happens, of course, to be Lenny Montana, who played Luca Brasi in The Godfather. So, and he has barely any role to play in this movie, but he helps her up onto the boat one time and then helps her back down again. And but he doesn't die. I expected him to die because I thought, well, he's an old man. He's the skipper of the boat. He's expendable. Yeah. But no, we don't really hear much from that. And to be honest, the character of Joey, her boyfriend, doesn't really have much of a part to play either, other than, you know, it's that typical thing in horror movies of somebody going, "No, this thing is happening. It really is happening." And he's going, "No, you're just imagining it. It's not really happening." That's pretty much the extent of their relationship. Really, a lot of it is focused on Mr. Frankie Avalon, who plays Paul Foley. Interesting one, this, Tom, that I never would have expected this from somebody like Frankie Avalon. Here's a guy who was he was a pop singer through the 60s, the 50s and 60s, I think, and was known for starring in sort of beach movies and these sort of fun time affairs. And he got a bit of a career resurgence when he starred in, which is where I first saw him, in Grease, where he does a scene in there, "Beauty school dropout, go back to high school."
Lovely.
Thank you. That's Frankie Avalon. He was in that. And people were like, "Oh, I remember Frankie Avalon. Oh, great." And he sort of was introduced because of course Grease was a sort of generation-defining movie for a lot of people when it came out, and he was exposed there. So it wasn't that, to me, it's not the lateral choice to then, I don't know, 4 or 5 years later, whatever it is, then star in Bloodsong, where he plays a maniac. And this is what I want to ask you, really, because of course we get lots of moments with him where he's being a maniac. How did you feel he portrayed that? Was there ever a feeling that, okay, I buy this, or was it just weird to see Frankie Avalon trying to be sinister?
I mean, first off, I guess he wouldn't be the first person to try and take a kind of dark turn in their career. You know, Robin Williams did it.
Yes.
And he to great effect.
Yeah.
Others as well who have tried to shake off a goody two-shoes image with a darker film. So, I can see the why. As to whether he's actually good at it, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no on that. I found, to be honest, there was times when he was okay.
Yeah.
Like, there's a point where there's like a sheriff or something at a gas station, and I think Frankie must have just offed someone, and they're in the back of the van, and the sheriff comes over and he's like, "Hey, nice van." And when he's trying to charm someone or that kind of thing, because obviously he's a very charming fellow. But there was just a kind of ridiculousness about it that I just couldn't shake. And I got him mixed up with, is it Frankie Valli?
Yes.
From the Four Seasons?
Yeah.
I got it mixed up with him. I thought it was him at first, and I kept expecting him to break out in some sort of falsetto kind of scream, which he virtually did at the end in the forklift truck scene, which we'll talk about. But I'm sorry, I've got to give a thumbs down to Frankie Avalon in this. What about you?
Well, because when I was a kid seeing him in Grease, and he's such a sort of warm presence in that. He's not in it. He's only in it for one musical number. But he's such a warm presence in it that it's difficult, because you can see that he is a charming guy even in this, and the way that he kind of portrays the psychotic element of the character is by sort of opening his eyes really widely, like that sort of arch villain type thing. And I found that, I don't think he does a bad job in it. I just don't know if he was particularly right for it. It is unusual. also the fact that, you know, there's no specific kind of... We never really get a true insight into why he's actually doing this. Like, what it was about the trauma of seeing his father killing himself and, you know, shooting his mother and all the rest of it. Why that then inspires him to kill other people. It's not really explained, you know. The flute thing I can understand, because, I mean, it's ridiculous. But... because it's laughable, you know. What it reminded me of is the Donald Duck thing in the New York Ripper, which is the Lucio Fulci thing, which is like, you know, it's just it takes away, you know, from the menacing element of the movie when the guy gets on the phone and he sounds like Donald Duck. And I feel like it's similar with the flute. The flute thing would not, you know, I've never been chased by a murderer. But if I was being chased by a murderer, Tom, in a cat and mouse like fashion, that flute would make me laugh. And I'd probably die because of it, Tom, because I'd be hiding behind a stack of barrels, you know, and then he'd be and I'd be like, okay, fine. Do you know what?
He should have played it as he chased people. That would have made it even better. Like, you know, as he's coming after them.
It would have been great. But yeah.
But there's a scene where he has sex with this woman, and afterwards, obviously, he breaks the flute out and, you know, has a little tinkle on the flute. If you were this woman, and she pretty much says it, she's just like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
You know? But, you know, that's something for people at home to try. Next time you know, enter into some sexual encounter, bring a flute along and just see what happens afterwards.
Just see what happens, and feel free, and you've got my permission to do it as well. Feel free to break it out in the middle of it and just see what happens. Perhaps time it with thrusting and see how it goes. Really, look. If she is, we're assuming that it's a man that's doing it. Could be a woman who's doing it as well. Could be anyone of any gender or any kind of sexuality. If your partner runs out in the middle of it because you've done that, they're not for you. They're not for you. Okay,
it's a good test, isn't it?
It's a good test of their patience, I think. But also, I mean, he's weird, isn't he? Because he's like talking about... He's only just met this woman. He picked her up. She was hitchhiking. And he's only just met her, and he's talking about... yeah, you know, we can go on a vacation and we can go on this trip and I've always wanted to go here. And she's like, well, I've only just met you. He gives her like a necklace that I guess he stole or bought from a gift shop. And so he's already, even if you take the flute out of it, he's already being incredibly weird about it and committal to this person that he's just, you know, he shagged as a one-off. And then, of course, he chokes her to death. So I suppose really the crux of the movie really is about Marion, about the visions that she sees. There are so many close-ups of her eyeball in this, Tom, that I could work... I'm pretty sure I could do laser surgery at this point. Like, I'm pretty sure I could get rid of someone's cataract.
Can I just check with you? You said before... Okay, so Marion, the young girl with the leg brace on, she has visions of Paul Foley. She has visions of his killings and stuff. So did she got a blood transfusion off him? Is that what happened? Because I'll be honest, man, I struggled to pay attention to this a lot of the time. So I must have missed that completely.
Yeah, it's a bit of a slog. Basically, she has the car accident. Her father is the one who caused the accident to happen. It was, as I say, it was an accident. He didn't mean for it to happen. But she had to have, I guess, leg surgery or whatever. And yes, they give her a blood transfusion, and the blood happens to have been donated by Paul Foley. And
so he's not like lying on the bed next to it or nothing, playing the flute while they do it.
But that would make the transfusion process smoother, I think. If he was doing it.
Who wouldn't love that?
Who wouldn't love that? You know. Now, sure, back in 1982, no problem with it. Today, you've got your iPhone or whatever. You can plug your AirPods in, and you're away. You're listening to what you want. But back in those days, Tom, it was flute or no flute, which is they should do a quiz show, a sequel to Deal or No Deal called Flute or No Flute, and you just have to find the box that's got a flute in it, and then Noel Edmonds plays it. Which is great. We've always wanted that, Tom. But yes, I did think, by the way, we don't do trivia and stuff anymore because it takes time. But I did think it was quite funny. In the scene where the doctors are talking about the blood transfusion, they actually say, I read this on IMDb, so I'm relaying it to you, that they actually say she's got blood type O positive, I think, or O negative.
Okay.
That's going to be really hard to find. As it turns out in the trivia, that is the most common type of blood in the world. So they got that bit wrong, Tom. The medical knowledge was not high up. But yes, that's why. Again, it's never actually explained why having his blood, she has some sort of weird psychic link with him, but she does.
I mean, people have blood transfusions all the time. Could you imagine? It would be mayhem. Everyone's seeing visions of everyone else doing stuff after a blood transfusion.
Yeah, I mean, my mum, my dear departed mother, when she had cancer, she had a blood transfusion at one point, and she didn't suddenly start seeing the activities of Peter Sutcliffe. It wasn't. It would have been. It would have been very unusual, Tom. But yeah, so, and then she discovers him burying the woman who he killed in the hotel, and from that point onwards, he is focused on her, and I feel like that's a very contrived way to do it, because he really had no link to her at all. She had a link to him. And so you have got a bit where she senses that he's nearby, and rather than being scared of it, she kind of approaches him, stands out in plain view of a man burying a body, and that allows for her to become his primary target. And of course it all kind of culminates in quite a long... Well, first of all, she's grounded essentially by her father because he caught her kissing Joey in the car. And what do you think of the father character? Because he's another big sort of irritant in it, isn't he?
I can barely remember him. I know he was supposed to be something that was causing trouble in her life. It was making her very troubled that her dad was this way, as we see from this scene in the middle of the movie where she's walking along the beach and this music swells like you have never heard before. It's just, do you remember that scene? You've got to remember this scene. She's just walking along the beach and there's this melodramatic music as if she has the troubles of the world on her shoulders. Her boyfriend's on a boat, her dad's an arsehole. It's all going on, and she's walking along the beach and this massive music swells. I can't believe you can't remember.
No, I do remember, because she's waiting for the boat to come back in, isn't she? Yeah, that's
probably.
It.
She seems to always be waiting for the boat.
Yeah, she's sitting on the dock waiting for the boat to come in, and that and that melodramatic music swells in, and it's a complete, and she's crying as well. I remember that, yeah. And it's a superfluous scene, really, because it doesn't communicate anything that we don't already know. She's just waiting for their bloody boyfriend again. That's all he does. He just comes in and then he goes. And then he comes in and then he goes on that boat with... I've got a feeling he's fucking the skipper.
Probably.
They're going out together, and there's nothing wrong with that. But hey, tell your partner, don't cheat. But yeah, it's... and then we get to that sort of climactic scene where Paul Foley finally tracks her down, knows where she lives, and breaks in, and he butchers her father. I mean, he attacks him with a hatchet, I think, and
fair play, they'll show a bit of blood, so fair play to him for that.
Yeah, there's a little bit of gore in this, it's nothing amazing, Savini's not going to be out of work here, but it's okay.
Frankie Avalon might be, but not Savini.
I wonder what happened after this. I don't think he ever did another horror movie after this one, but and then there's quite a long protracted cat and mouse sort of chase scene between him and Marion. Now, this is where I think we will be divided, because I don't think this, and we can kind of now summarise how we feel about it. I think it's fairly obvious how you feel about it, and I have to say that 95% of it, of how you feel, is how I feel as well. It's not a very good movie. It's quite a slog. Frankie Avalon is not great as a psychopath. The flute is silly. I do think that to their credit, the chase stuff at the end, at least they don't... It is protracted and it's a bit too long and it needs to be kind of shaved down a bit, but at least they're trying to give you a little bit of suspense there, and they're trying to make it seem like she's not just... that it's not just over in 5 minutes. So it does go on for... I'm not sure how long this goes on for, this scene. 15 minutes, maybe? 10, 15 minutes.
lifetime.
It was it was a long time, and I sort of liked the fact that they did try to go there, and they did try to make it feel a bit more expansive. This woman really is trying to fight for her life against the man with the flute. So I sort of liked that aspect of it. Tom, come in here and tell me how you feel about it.
Okay, this is the point where this bit of a slog, bit boring, quite fragmented movie. You know, there were scenes in this where I was like, why is this even here?
Yeah.
You know, they were just so quite boring. So this movie that is all of these things with Frankie Avalon not being particularly great, it goes from that to the ridiculous for me in this scene. Because it's where he has to go full psycho, you know?
Yeah.
You don't go full psycho, Frankie. He's like, he's got this squeaky little voice, hasn't he? And he's like, I like you, Marion. I like you. And then she sort of jumps off a load of wood into the forklift truck that he's driving at her. And he's like the most unfearsome movie killer ever, because what does he say? He's like, stop it, stop it.
You're hurting me. Yeah.
So any menace that he had is completely gone. But then he drives a forklift truck into the river, okay? And then we get this scene afterwards where she goes to hospital and he comes back like in a doctor's coat it's supposed to be your classic, you know, end of Friday the 13th, Jason is actually alive.
Yeah.
End of Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy's actually alive. It's supposed to be that kind of thing, but it just comes off as so silly for me. So yeah, if you dig it, man, that's cool. But I'm just like, it goes from the boring to the ridiculous for me at the end.
Well, I never said I dig it. I just said that I quite like the fact that they didn't just make it a 5-minute chase, that they actually tried to give it at least a little bit of suspense. The problem you have, and you're absolutely right, is that Frankie Avalon is not very good at this. And so you do have, you know, like she stabs him at one point and then he's holding his stomach and he's like, it hurts.
Yeah. That's right, yeah.
And then, you know, at one point he turns like the crusher on in the factory, because they're in like a warehouse, like a factory. And I thought he's going to end up in that, isn't he? He's definitely going to end up in that. And then I thought what they're going to do is she'll throw him in there. Of course, he gets ground up and crushed and all the rest of it, so he's no more. And because there's nobody else to tie the crimes to, she ends up being the one who's the killer. And of course they can. And I thought it would have been quite clever. It would have been cruel, but it would have been quite clever in a way if they'd said, okay, well, she hated her father because her father was horrible to her, so she murdered him in the house, you know. I thought that would have been an interesting way. And we kind of get a little bit of that because they never find his body, because of course he drives the forklift truck into water. By the way, it's worth saying, I don't understand people in films who can just get in a forklift truck and drive it. It takes a lot of training to be able to drive a forklift truck. But
yeah, he uses the thing and everything.
He does, doesn't he? Like, he just knows how to do it, you know. But anyway, he lands in the water, of course, and they bring in a guy like this random night watchman, this character we've never seen before, just to get killed so that they can have a body to show at the end of it. Yeah. And you know, and then at that point they put her in hospital because there's nobody to tie the crimes to, because she's the only one who kind of knows about this guy. So I do think that side of it was interesting, because it could almost be a thing. Now, they're not clever enough to have done this, Tom, but there could almost be a thing where you could say, is it a little bit like High Tension? Do you remember that French horror movie, High Tension?
Yeah, I don't think I ever saw it, but I remember it was a big deal at the time.
Yeah, but now I feel like I don't want to spoil it for you. In case
I think I know.
But if you've not seen High Tension, just give me fast forward 20 seconds here, folks. The twist of High Tension is that the woman who has been trying to help her friend escape from the killer, well, she has actually been the killer all along, and it was all in her head. I thought that would be kind of an interesting way of maybe doing it in this movie. But of course that couldn't happen because he's killing people that she is nowhere near, you know, so it wouldn't make any sense. You know, Tom, because we've covered this before, I don't like the ending where it's all for nothing. And what I mean by that is we've been through this whole thing with Marion. Whatever you want to say about this movie, it's not a very good movie. We've been through this whole thing with Marion. She survived the ordeal, and then right at the end, he's there in the doctor's outfit, and he must kill her because, of course, there's nothing else she can do. She's been sedated. She can't get out. She's been handcuffed to the bed. And so what was the point of it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I really am not that fond of... It works in Friday the 13th because at the end of Friday the 13th, it's almost like a dream sequence. You know, it works in some movies. But, you know, like... what were they called? I Know What You Did Last Summer. Those movies started doing that as well. At the end of each movie, whatever the girl's... I can't remember the girl's name. Jennifer Love Hewitt or whatever it was. She always gets caught by the killer at the end in like a surprise scene. But then she's alive in the next one. It's like, well... What's the point then? Why have I been through this for almost 90 minutes for you then to just have the killer win at the end, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm not that fond of that, Tom. In and of itself, look, it's fairly ropey, cheap looking, not very good. Frankie Avalon doesn't really sell it as a maniac. But he does play that flute, Tom, and I feel like the flute is the standout moment here.
The flute is the star. It's just so uninspired in so many ways. Yep. I think they must have thought that the flute would be like this creepy thing, you know, you hear the music and oh, that's quite ominous, you know, but it's not. It's just really uninspired in every way. And I don't like it.
Yeah, no, it's not.
I'll never watch it again.
No, it's not a very good movie. But I am inspired to write a horror movie where I play the killer and I've got a kazoo.
Yeah, or like if there was a sequel with Neil Sedaka in it or something, you know, just a whole string of them with all these light entertainers would be quite good.
Get Neil Diamond in there, and then as he chases people, he can sing "Sweet Caroline." Okay, well, so that's our review of that. It's really not worth bothering with. The film was reissued on DVD by BCI Home Entertainment as part of a double bill with the film Mausoleum back in 2008. I'm trying to... Have I seen...
That was a good one.
I'm trying to think.
That was in the last show.
Was it? You don't call me out like that.
That film we just did.
Call me out like that, Tom. Oh wait, Mausoleum was the one with the
girl with the glowy eyes.
The girl, yeah. No, I did like that.
Yeah, she turned into the demon.
Well, this was an American release that now seems to be out of print and fetching a pretty penny on sites like Amazon.
Oh my god!
Yeah, if you look at this, Tom, if you're feeling like you really desperately want a copy and you're from the UK, you can grab one that's on import for the princely sum of £86, Tom.
Wow.
Do you want that for Christmas?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
Though
I was going to get you an Amazon voucher. I was going to get you a £10 Amazon voucher. That'll get you £10 off that price. Come on.
No. Well, it's also on YouTube, and I think that's the way people.
Yeah, and it doesn't. You know, it. Apparently, I think I read on Wikipedia or maybe on IMDb that they lost like the masters for this movie. So
shame.
So even the DVD version of it is like a crappy video transfer. So I've got a feeling this is a movie that is lost in the fullness of time, and I've got a feeling you're okay with that, Tom.
You know what? I would normally hate things like that happening, but I don't think I'll lose any sleep. I think I'll be okay.
No, just watch Grease, and Frankie Avalon's in that, and it's quite a good movie. There's no blood in it, but it's a good thing though. John Travolta's in it, hey? So you've got that for you. All right, Tom. Well, that's our first movie, and oh blimey, is that a knock at the door?
It is. It must be. Maybe it's Father Christmas, Chris. I don't know.
Tom, did you tell people about where we were going to be? I thought it was just going to be me and you.
Well, it's Christmas, mate. People want to see us. What can I do? What can I do?
I don't want to see anybody, but can you answer it? Because if it's an intruder, they'll be scared by you. They won't.
Okay.
They'll look at me and just look at me like a sack of jelly, Tom. But you're a mighty man. You answer it.
Okay, well, pour us another drink. I'll answer it then, okay?
Okay, all right, you bloody alcoholic git.
It's Andy Roberts.
Oi!
Hello, guys. How are you?
Andy, welcome to our little Christmas extravaganza. It's good to meet you, man. How's it going?
Really, really well, thank you. All things considered, it's really, really great to be here. So thank you for having me.
Well, come in, get out of the cold, take your coat off. Nothing inappropriate's going to happen here. because I've got Tom on strict orders not to mess about with anybody who might come to the door.
I think that's always good advice.
It is. Well, Tom's the ravenous one of the two. I'm the respectful one. It's so great to see you, Andrew. Last time we spoke, we didn't speak really. You sent in some feedback, of course, to the Strange and Deadly show. You always very diligently did that. You were, I believe, looking at a lot of pornographic material on the computer. The hard drives were taken, and the FBI got you. What did they hand the hard drives back? Because I assume everything was. You're a nice man. I assume everything was tickety boo.
Yes, everything was indeed tickety boo. There was nothing so untoward that I could not have it back. So there's always that, isn't there? But I don't blame anybody whatsoever. People are just being cautious. You don't know what kind of weirdos are out there, you see. So yeah, it's all tickety boo. Chris, how about you? Everything okay with you?
Yeah. So that picture of the dog, they were all right with that?
I mean, it was a movie poster. I mean, what could they do, eh?
I mean, I find it hard to believe that in the justice system of 2020 they couldn't have brought some sort of charge forward for that. But I'm glad you're here, Andy. I'm glad you're here. I've been okay. I've not had the best year, but I'm still here. I'm fighting, and that's about all we can really do. It's so lovely to see your good self. You've been with the Strange and Deadly show in terms of a listener, and quite a devout listener, really, for quite some years, haven't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I remember listening to the the Video Nasties podcast, with Christopher Brown, and once I'd completed that, it was just a natural progression because your podcast was doing the Section 3 list, so it just became a natural thing. And I joined, I'd say, relatively late, because I think you were already a considerable chunk into the list when I started. So I just, at that point, I kind of felt like I had to make up for lost time, and I started just sending in feedback every time you did one. So
yeah, did you ever imagine you'd still be here 7-8 years later while we trudge ever so slowly towards the finishing line?
Well, no, I didn't. But at the same time, sometimes it just works out that way. I mean, I think I remember a few years ago. Do you remember when I said I was starting my book project? And I think you remember. I remember you asking me, "Is this going to be out in about a year or two?" And I jokingly said, "I probably still won't have finished it by 2020." And here we are in 2020, and I have indeed still not finished it. So sometimes these things just happen, even contrary to the plans that we have. So, that's just life, unfortunately.
Andy, Chris and I have exchanged some gifts here today. Thankfully, he's still got the receipt, and, but
thank goodness for that. I need it as well. Some of the stuff you brought me, Tom.
But, it's been a great year for a terrible year in a lot of ways, but if we talk about releases of DVDs and Blu-rays, we're still getting some great stuff through. Is there anything that sticks out to you this year that is something a bit special?
Well, I remember towards the beginning of the year, there was a very, it's had very, very positive critical reception now, but a found footage film that was actually made in the UK called Host. And I think it came out possibly February or March, something like that. It was exclusive to Shudder, which I think it's a Netflix style horror streaming service, isn't it? And it debuted on that, and I remember that we watched it, and it was very unique, but also at the same time quite effective because it was actually filmed during the COVID pandemic, which obviously has just taken over everything this year. And, I think I speak for everyone when I'd say I don't think anyone really expected to be living through a pandemic in any sort of way, shape or form. So to have someone in the UK as well do that thing of let's just make a horror movie during a pandemic, and it really works. It's sort of a bit like Unfriended, but it's all set on a computer during a Zoom call of all things. And I just really connected with it. It really, really worked for me. So I'd say it's fairly special because it actually ended up inspiring me just to write something about it, something like not quite a review, but a bit like a celebration of it, a bit like a critical piece about it. and I ended up being published in an online magazine. So it's ended up leading to a lot of great things, really.
Oh, superb. What was the magazine?
It's called Horrified. So
Okay.
it's just come out. It's a UK horror based magazine. So it's all online at the moment, but it tends to cover British projects. So either stuff from the 60s or upwards, like the Hammer era, the 80s. Modern releases, but actually I've also started writing about British-made horror video games in it too, because that comes under the same umbrella. So it's just been recently launched, really, about a few months ago.
So this movie host, it's like made up of Zoom videos and stuff like that. So is it like people sitting there and then like a hand will come into shot with a knife in it and just stab them to death? Is that it?
Well, it's about this group of friends. It's predominantly girls. They meet each other over Zoom because obviously they can't meet up in person. There's references to like the fact that they're in lockdown, and they want to. Because a part of their activity, they want to perform a séance online. So they do the whole, light a candle, they do that sort of thing. And it very quickly turns sour. But I just think it's pretty damn effective for what it is. And it's very well done, because obviously all the effects had to be done on camera by the people that were in their own houses, because no one can meet up. So the crew was very limited, and they did the absolute best that they could with the resources they had. So it's, for me, it just really connected with me, like, very well. And it's got some decent scares in it too. It's really, really well done.
I think creativity is still thriving this year, especially. It's such a great thing because the film industry has been dealt a very serious blow. The mainstream film industry, which you would expect to have been quite secure and quite strong, has really taken a battering because of what's happening. So for people on the indie side of things to be able to do something like that is such a great accomplishment. I've actually heard of this movie. I've not seen it, so I don't have Shudder at the moment, but I had heard that they were making it, and it sounds like it was made, in a very safe way and a very effective way. I mean, I have to say, young people trying to do a séance, stupid bastards. Why they do? This is why I don't trust young people, Tom. But it sounds really interesting. Yeah.
The thing is, Andy, Chris and I are probably the worst people to speak to about new horror. We don't keep up to stuff.
Old bastards.
Yeah, we're pretty terrible with that. But I saw on social media and so on that you got a pretty special box set, which is probably a bit more in our wheelhouse. I was hoping that maybe you would have put your hand in your pocket and maybe brought us a copy of it each tonight, but don't worry about it. It's okay.
I was very upset when I didn't see 2 box set sized items in his hands, in both hands, Tom.
I know, but it's Christmas. It's the thought that counts, I'm sure.
It was a loud knock, but I thought perhaps he knocked with his chin.
But tell us about that, Andy.
So, as you probably both know, Scream Factory announced that they were going to do a very, very special box set of the Friday the 13th movies. And I was fairly skeptical, I'd say, at first, because, I mean, how many times have these films been released, on various editions and stuff like that? And I thought, I'd made a decision to just not go for it, because I just thought, there has to be something legitimately special about this set in order to really get me to buy it. Really, unless it's sort of like uncut versions of the original films, that nothing was really going to make me buy these movies again. And for a while, I put it off for a long time, and then there was finally some news that actually they had managed to locate the uncut version of at least Friday the 13th Part 2. And I thought... No, really? Yes, and I thought that is probably the one that has evaded most people, because it's probably the biggest cut. I mean, outside of Part 7, it's never been released in its uncut form, and there's never been any snippings anywhere that anyone's ever seen. And
wow,
they managed to finally locate it, and I think it was in somebody's basement on a VHS. The VHS was not even a conventional VHS. You needed a specific machine to play it because it was a master tape. It was also infested with mold. and the and the reels were actually stuck together.
Chris, had you been watching that?
Just because you know I live in a dank crypt.
So there's this extraordinary story where they had to, obviously they didn't want to risk mailing it through the air to producers or anybody else. So someone actually physically went on a commercial air flight, carefully packaged it, held it the whole time, got it back, discovered the damage, and then there's this crazy thing where they were told by an expert that they could potentially release the reels and get rid of it if they baked the reels in an oven.
Yeah, I've heard of that process, yeah.
Really, really sort of crazy stuff. But they had to be careful because this literally was the only version in existence. And if something happened, the footage was gone forever. So thankfully, they managed to actually recover it. And I just thought, that's incredible. I think just the effort that they went alone to get that footage, I thought, I'm going to go get it.
Yeah.
I ended up getting it. It's an absolutely wonderful collection. Sadly, it ended up being a slight problem because there's been some issues actually with it. So I think Scream Factory are issuing some replacement discs shortly. But essentially, there's some slight problems with Friday the 13th Part 3's 3D intro. There's some of the 3D effects don't quite pop out as they should. Jason X has some audio missing from the sleeping bag kill.
Oh dear.
And oddly, Jason Goes to Hell, it's missing an entire arm snap, even though it's supposed to be the unrated version. So there's been some very slight problems with it. But overall, I'd say I'm not particularly bothered because I'm a bit biased. I'm not really a fan of Jason Goes to Hell.
Jason Goes to Hell's got one of the best. Unfortunately, it's not because it's Jason in another body, but it's there's a kill in a tent where he I can't remember what he I think it's a girl that he kind of, is it a girl that he impales and then kind of slices open?
I think he shoves a rebar through her chest and then tears it upwards and it splits her shoulder open and just the torso is just spurting.
And it is one of the best kills in the franchise. Unfortunately, you haven't got the masked Jason doing it.
No.
It came out on a DVD here in the UK, and as far as I'm aware, I mean, the version that's in this box set does that have that scene in it?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Yeah, the only bit it does, there's a bit where towards the end when Jason has entered the body of like the boyfriend of somebody important and goes on like a final rampage at a cafeteria, and one of the kids who comes out to stop him like tries to punch him, and possessed Jason just grabs his hand and pulls it downwards and snaps the bone and it exposes. That whole bit's gone. The snap is gone. So, but again, I mean, I'm not usually a real, anally retentive person about censored print, but I'm actually not. I'm so not fond of Part 9 that I'm just actually a bit like, I didn't really like it anyway.
I mean, I was going to make a stupid joke and say that you said that there were issues with the box set, and I was going to say, is it because Scream Factory accidentally put the remake in it?
To be honest, I haven't watched the remake since the very first time I saw it, and with the amount of people that watch it now and kind of talk about it, I don't know. I still don't think it's as badly received as, say, for example, the Nightmare on Elm Street remake.
No, that's definitely worse. I mean, the Friday remake, Derek Mears is a really good Jason. His movement and everything. And then when you see interviews with him, he was really passionate about the role. And there have been quite a few people who played Jason over the years who did it kind of contractually. And him and Kane Hodder seem to be the two people who are really quite passionate about the role. But it's quite tame, and it was made at a time when you haven't got the MPAA, tearing things to bits anymore. They really could have upped the gore factor, and it's not very creative in terms of kills and things like that. So a lot could have been done with it to make it better, I think. But yeah,
it does have one thing that I think I liked it for, and that was they actually went and dared to kill the final girl kind of archetype.
Yes.
There was a character that you were really rooting for because she was a decent character and it looked like she was going to be one of the survivors, and they quite callously just killed her without any hesitation, and it was quite a powerful moment because you did think that she was genuinely going to survive. I liked it for that, I didn't like much of the rest, I have to say.
All right, well, that sounds wonderful. I wish I could have my own copy of it, Andrew, but you've not delivered. So I would like you to go, but you can. Would you like a glacé cherry on a bit of a toothpick before you go?
Yes, I will gladly accept anything that you want to put in my mouth.
Goodness me, Andrew, that could go anywhere. Merry Christmas, Andrew. Leave now, but take care out in the cold, dear boy, and hopefully. It is cold. It is cold. But you'll just have to deal with it. Thanks, Andy. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for dropping by, mate.
Okay, well, bye, guys. I'll come over another time.
Okay. No, thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Well, that was nice, wasn't it? You know, that was unexpected, but nice to see Andrew here at the house.
Yeah, I wasn't bothered personally, but...
Well, you'll be bothered by this, Chris. Or will you? I don't know, but my gift to you on this Christmas is the film that we're going to be talking about next, and it's called Don't Answer the Phone. Maybe we shouldn't have answered the door. But,
possibly not. But he's all right, Andrew, isn't he? He's okay.
Sorry, Andrew. Sorry, Andrew.
Why are you being so horrible about Andrew?
Well, you know, he could have brought us something, but he came empty-handed.
That's the only reason I kicked him out, Tom, is because I was mad about the fact that there he was gloating about his Friday the 13th box set. There's nothing in hand. I gave him a cocktail sausage and everything, and I've got nothing to show for it. But hopefully he'll knock later and bring us our prizes, because he's one of our biggest supporters, is Andrew, and I've always been appreciative of him, even though he is a serious perv. But... he brings us nothing to the table. Knock on the door, there's nothing there. Not even a glass of sherry, a bottle of sherry. Although if you had a bottle, Tom, blimey, you go through that like a fucking... Anyway,
okay, so our second movie is Don't Answer the Phone, released in 1980, no other titles that we know of, and directed by Robert Hammer.
Yeah, I'm a Hammer man.
Starring Nicholas Worth, Flo Lawrence, and James Westmoreland, among others. So, Chrstmas is a former army veteran with a very, very sick mind. His interest is chiefly in luring women into his seedy little world or breaking into their homes. Either way, he'll strangle them with a coin placed inside a pair of stockings. What? And then rape the corpse before leaving it's took a dark turn this Christmas, hasn't it?
I know. Why you make me watch this?
I know. Before leaving candles inside their orifices and departing, the police began investigating the shocking murders, putting Lieutenant Chris McCabe and Sergeant Hatcher on the job.
That's me and you, isn't it, Tom? That's me and
is.
You. I'm Lieutenant Chris McCabe. No, because you're a lot more charming than me. I'm Sergeant Hatcher, the stupid one, and you're Lieutenant Chris McCabe.
Okay, so as they collect the evidence, the story continues with a psychologist named Dr. Lindsay Gale. She works for a local radio station, dealing with the local callers and helping with advice. A disturbing man named Ramon often calls in, talking about his headaches. That man is actually Kirk Smith, affecting a Latino accent. Very convincing one, I'm sure. Smith continues his psychotic rampage throughout the city, using his role as a photographer as a disguise for his horrific actions. He acts charmingly to the women before suddenly turning very, very violent. McCabe and Hatcher work to figure out who the killer might be, as he's not shy about leaving clues at the scene. It all begins to circle back around to Dr. Gale, who Smith develops an infatuation with. As the police chase the evidence, the bodies mount up, and Smith's psychosis reaches boiling point as he begins stalking the petrified Dr. Gale, leading up to a very bloody conclusion.
Wow, so this is what a photographer's studio really looks like.
More coffee?
No, thanks. I can't believe I'm this lucky. I'm in LA 2 weeks and I get picked up hitchhiking by a photographer who needs a model. My friends back in Indiana are going to be so knocked out when they see me on a cover of a magazine. It's all like a dream to me, really.
Yes, it is like a dream. You know, Sue Ellen, hitchhiking in California can be very dangerous. I think you should be careful, honey.
You're telling me. One guy stopped and asked if I'd give him head. Imagine, that would never happen back in Indiana. But I can trust you, huh?
Of course you can. Now, why don't you go in there and get dressed, and I'll fix up the studio. There are a few things I have to take care of, and we'll get started.
All right.
So, a similar movie, Chris. Just a general serial killer movie, I guess. Similar in some ways, but very much not similar in other ways. So let's get into this one. Where do you want to begin?
Well, Tom, what the fuck is going on, Tom? What's going on? What's happened, Tom? What's happened to this world, Tom? That's what I want to ask you first of all. What's happened to this world?
We don't talk much about these films before we discuss them, but you let me know that you couldn't wait to talk about this one, but I didn't know which way that was going to go, so I'm curious to hear. Well, your thoughts.
You still don't. I'm just Now. Here's the thing. So I thought I had seen this movie in the past, but as it turns out, I've seen another movie that's don't answer the door, whatever it might be.
There's a few don't answers.
There's a few don't answers, yeah, and I thought maybe I'd seen this before. I definitely hadn't. And I knew that you had bought this, and so I figured, okay, well, you're pretty au fait with this movie. But as it turns out, you were saying to me that you'd kind of bought it on a whim but never watched it.
Yeah.
And you got rid of it, didn't you, when you were... during the great minimalism purge that you had, which seems to have been reversed quite dramatically, Tom, I have to say, based on some of the stuff you're putting on your Instagram.
Very finely curated stuff, very finely. I don't just buy any old shit now.
Let me have a look at those shelves, Tom. But, yeah, so, okay. So, this movie begins, like, the opening credits are Kirk Smith, played by Nicholas Worth, shirtless, just sort of breathing menacingly and kind of grinning. And I'm like, okay. The thing that these two movies have in common is, apart from the fact that they're about a psychopath, is that we see the killer from the very beginning. There's no attempt to hide the killer's identity like you would get in your typical slasher movie. Apart from, the big franchise ones like Halloween and Freddy or whatever, they've got a mask or a personality or something like that. But you would get a lot of slasher movies that came in the wake of Friday the first Friday the 13th movie, even though, subsequently that it's Pamela Voorhees who's doing the killings. For most of the movie, the killer is unidentified. You don't know who it is. And that seemed to be very influential. I suppose Black Christmas to a degree as well, because you never really saw the killer in that. That seemed to be very influential on then the slate of slasher films that would follow. These two movies, although I wouldn't describe them as slasher movies as such, they have those elements, don't they? But they're not really that. But both movies, we know who the person is almost from the word go. So right from the beginning, Kirk Smith, played by Nicholas Worth, you go, okay, well, that's got to be the psychopath because the opening credits are weird. He's being weird in a weird way. And right from the very beginning, he breaks into a home and he's got the stocking over his head, over his face, and he's wearing sort of the army jacket, and he chokes this woman, doesn't he? And then we learn from the police that he has raped her and that he's put now let me just say this. We don't shy away from giving you all the information that we can. The details of the things that this guy has done, even though obviously you don't see the things, but are quite gruesome and quite nasty. So the first woman that we see him, the first victim that he claims, if you like, he's bitten one of her breasts off. And and you learn that detail from the police, and of course they're looking underneath the sheet and they can see it, and it is so right from the very beginning there is that feeling that okay, I got that feeling straight away that I think I'm in for an exploitation film here, something that is going to be quite grisly and dark. And as the movie went on throughout, it reminded me a bit of the New York Ripper, the Lucio Fulci film, in that it as we'll get to, there is a very serious kind of grisly side of it, And there's an element that some people feel is quite misogynistic about both of those movies, about this one and New York Ripper. But there's also an element of real ridiculousness there.
Yeah.
And Tom, I mean, how do you get through this, really, without speaking about the central character? The main character in this, really, is Kirk Smith, played by Nicholas Worth. And it's very difficult. I'll tell you this and then I'll hand it over to you, Tom. There's the scene early on where he calls into the radio station, he puts on the Latin voice. And it is super over the top. And I was not expecting that. And I didn't. Right. I wasn't expecting him to act that way. You know, we get movies where there's the serial killer calling in and taunting people or whatever, and usually they'll put on a menacing voice or whatever. I didn't expect him to do a comedy Latin accent. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? Let me hand it over to you at this point, and we'll kind of work through it as we go. But Nicholas Worth, Tom. Nicholas Worth!
You know, you can watch something like Friday the 13th, and we could watch those all day and watch people get hacked to pieces, and we're happy as Larry. They're not films that really hurt us in any way. You know, they're like roller coaster rides.
Fantastical.
Yeah. So there's, you know, so it's easy to just watch people get butchered and not really feel anything for that, you know. Then on the other end of the scale, you've got something like Maniac, a favourite of ours, which is a bit more gruesome in a realistic way. Joe Spinell is a fascinating figure to watch. I never felt it was going for titillation, even though there is a little bit of nudity in it. And Frank Zito, there's a certain sexuality about him, whereas this is a bit more like the film is showing us a sexual predator, a serial killer sexual predator, but I think it's also trying to titillate a little bit in that exploitation way. You know, everyone's barometer for that kind of thing is going to be different. I don't particularly enjoy sexual violence movies, you know what I mean? They've just never really been my thing. And, you know, Rob Zombie seems to use rape a lot in his movies, and I don't really enjoy that. You know, maybe it's, I suppose, necessary for some films, but so this one, I was a bit like, okay, you're not just doing this to kind of hurt the audience, which is fine. I don't mind a film that's going for the jugular, but I think you're doing it to try and titillate the audience a bit as well. Yeah. Which I'm not saying is a bad thing, because, you know, God knows I like a sleazy movie as well. So I was just very conflicted about it in a few ways. But this central character of Kirk Smith by Nicholas Worth, again, I was quite conflicted by him. I didn't know whether I was watching a load of old nonsense or someone who was choosing a particular portrayal of this killer and actually pulling it off, because he's playing this guy like a big man-child. And that's kind of what he is, because, and you will see this with, you know, genuine real-life murders, the way they project their fantasy self into what they're doing, you know?
Yeah.
And so here was this guy, he was, in reality, just a worthless, sad nobody of a man. But he just projects himself in this way, and you see him when he's all smartly dressed, where he's like, yes, I'm coming to take your photograph, and stuff like that. And then, you know, he'll have his top off and his jeans up underneath his chest, you know, where he just looks ridiculous, but he thinks he's the dude strutting around, you know what I mean? So there's a few things I'm conflicted on in this movie, and I'm not sure I've completely solidified my thoughts on it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was a very unusual watch, and it's so all over the place tonally, this movie. Like, it really...
Yeah, it's like comedy
There's
scenes.
There's comedy in it. Like the two cops, Chris McCabe and Sergeant Hatcher, they've been ripped out of like a 70s cop movie, 70s cop TV show. Like, they are grinning and smiley and working together to try and solve the crime. And then there's like a scene where these horrible kind of grisly things have happened, and then there's the doctor who's kind of lecturing the police officers about it, and he's delivering it in a comical way, and then you've got the guy who's on the scene, like, dealing with the bodies and everything he says is meant to be humorous, like he's laughing at the fact that these people have died. It's like, and then you've got, Kirk Smith, who kind of comes in, who sometimes is very menacing, other times he's ridiculous. I mean, he's so over the top and loud and looks silly, and I can't remember the last time I watched a movie that was so over the place in terms of tone, like, because the crimes that are being committed and how grisly and nasty they are and how violent they are against women. This guy isn't going after anybody else. He's going after women, and he's killing women, he's raping women, he is doing horrible things to them after they have died, paired with his performance, and then all the comedy stuff alongside it. There's a bit where the police are, like, doing research and everything, and there's music that sounds like it's out of an 80s action movie, and it's like, what's going on? And then you get the character of the psychologist, Dr. Lindsay Gale. Terrific, Tom, absolutely terrific is Dr. Lindsay Gale. And the terrific Dr. Lindsay Gale, she's there, and it's never quite sort of clearly defined to why he's decided to focus on her particularly, like why he calls in and says these things. I mean, what we get from the movie is that he was in the army and he has PTSD. That's what we get. And then, of course, as the movie goes on and towards the end of it, we get to hear that he obviously has not had a great childhood. He had mental issues. They were trying to send him to different doctors, and it wasn't working out for him. And that is why he is the way he is. But it doesn't. Unfortunately, there are horrible people in the world, and there are people who have done this. I mean, I was reading about the movie, reading some of the trivia about it, and apparently this is somewhat based on the Hillside Strangler, or Stranglers, as it turned out to be. So there is a somewhat of a basis in reality here, even though it's an original story of its own. There are unfortunately, a lot of chiefly men who have done horrible, nasty, misogynistic, violent things towards women. Mm-hmm. And to have that then couched in this this mix of different tones I found really weird. There would be times where I'm like, oh God, that sounds, what he's done there is horrible. Killing this woman, raping her, putting candles in her orifices as a way of mocking her, I suppose, and mocking the police, to then be followed up with the two cops grinning and laughing, making jokes. It's like, it's a very unusual thing. It's interesting that you mentioned Maniac, Tom, because I did think of Maniac a few times when I was watching this. I feel like you and I do tend to be drawn to that type, where it's very much a character study of this person who's kind of losing their mind, really. And you can see it in Maniac. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, is another one. Christmas Evil, again, we were interested in that because Christmas Evil was very much that. This guy who basically is probably quite a good person, really, deep down, doesn't really want to hurt people, but he's just been pushed and pushed and pushed until he can take no more. And then in the case of Joe Spinell and Maniac, Frank Zito, he is doing horrible things as well, but they do try to show that this is a guy who's very, very psychologically damaged. Yeah. In this one, he's a pretty sick guy, isn't he?
He is. I'll tell you what I liked in it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is like David Fincher's Zodiac or anything, this sort of, great detective story, but I enjoyed the sort of detective aspect of it from a different time, where they just got to hit the streets and they got to, ask questions and show pictures and like, have you seen anything? And you wonder how anyone ever solved any crimes back in those days without like CCTV and DNA and all these things. that, you know, the police rely on now. And to be honest, their attitudes didn't bother me that much. You know, I've spoken to people who, you know, drive ambulances, or, you know, cops, or even undertakers, who say that they tend to have quite a gallows humor about them. You know, the things that would bother us as civilians just don't bother them, and part of their coping mechanism is just to make a joke about things. And often that would seem very disrespectful to us, but to them it's just because it's how they process their day. So I thought that was okay, but you're right in that there was other scenes, like when they went to that kind of brothel place, and there was people like weighing up drugs there, and then there was like this. They went in there trying to find, you know, information about the guy, and it was like something out of Benny Hill. You know, there was this this like totally over the top gay guy running out, and he said something to them on the way out, and you know, all kinds of stuff going on like that. So I do agree that tonally it was a bit all over the place as well. But yeah, you know, I'm still very conflicted on Nicholas Worth as Kirk Smith and the tone of it in terms of what it is. But again, like you said before, it is an exploitation movie. And I think you and I are probably a bit out of that world lately, aren't we? You know, so to kind of come back into it with something like this is a bit strange, because we hear a lot about what he's done, but you're right, we don't see it. But what we do see is every woman who gets killed, they'll take their top off before it actually happens. And you, most of the time, you don't even see the killing, or, you know, you see very little of it, and you definitely don't see the aftermath. So that's why I think there is that element of it. It wants to titillate you. It's not there to just hurt you. And if it's there to just hurt you, fair enough. Lots of films are like that. So I don't know, man. I don't know. It's a funny one.
It's difficult, isn't it? You know, I think I'm there with you in that I don't really know how I feel about it. In that I do think there are things about the movie that do work very well, and I think there are things about the movie that don't work very well. This was a first-time director, Robert Hammer, and he directed. This is his one and only movie. He never directed anything else again. And I feel like he tried to throw everything in. And you're absolutely right about the gallows humor and all the rest of it. I can only imagine for people who have to see very, very dark things almost every day, or certainly every week of their life, every month of their life, you have to have a coping mechanism for that. And it's something that I personally don't understand, of course, because I'm not working within those roles. But I can totally understand why you would need to do that. I don't have I actually found the lead cop quite charming, I thought. What's his name? James.
Chris McCabe, James Westmoreland.
James Westmoreland. Yeah, I thought he was quite charming. You could see this guy in a cop movie, you know, and you could see him on like a TV show or something like that. And I think he would work quite well. I think the psychologist character is okay. Like, there's nothing really. She's just there really to be the target of Kirk Smith's affections, or affections as it is. Yeah. This film, what it really comes down to, I think, is if you can get past all the tonal weirdness of it, is how you feel about Nicholas Worth and his performance. There are times, I mean, I have to say this, he committed, didn't he? Like, he really commits to this, and he really gives it his all. And I was looking at his filmography, and he was in lots of different stuff over the years, and I think he actually had been in the army himself as well. And he chiefly played sort of heavies and things like that. Like, he was in the Swamp Thing movie, if you remember Swamp Thing, the 80s movie. Was that directed by Wes Craven? It was.
The first one was, yeah.
I remember quite liking it at the time. But yeah, it's so he was in that, and he's in a bunch of different things. I think that this must be the performance of his lifetime. Whether it all works or not, it's so hard to say, because he is like, when he breaks into the Latino accent, like I thought it came across quite comical. I don't think he sold it in the way that it was meant to be. But then there are times where he's like in front of a mirror and he's talking to himself and he's geeing himself up. And there are times where he's lifting weights, isn't he? as well. And he's like, and it's like, and I found those. I don't know that you sold me on your menacing nature of this guy from those scenes, but I have to say that I do think that if you saw this man, this big mass of a guy running at you in the dark of night, I think you'd probably be quite terrified, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. He was vicious. You know, once he got going, he was vicious. But I think, and whether he was 100% successful at it, I don't know. But I do think there was this level of, he was supposed to be ridiculous in the sense that he was just a sad bastard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's a sad fucker. In any other way, he would just be a complete loser in life. But he's got this fantasy of himself as this big, strong man, when he's not. He's a piece of shit, basically.
Irredeemable.
But he has this idea of himself. And he's got no self-awareness of how ridiculous he actually is, and how he's just a pathetic person, really. So whether he 100% gets that, I don't know. But I think he does, at least some of the time.
I mean, there have been people like this in real life serial killers. People like Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, who had no remorse at all. And he was just a predator of a man. And I guess they're trying to get at a bit of that. You know, there's childhood trauma here, there's clear mental issues. So you're meant to believe this is a man who is clearly suffering badly. But the things that he's doing to women means that he doesn't deserve to be free, and he doesn't deserve to be this is somebody who you can tell would never, if they'd been able to get him in prison and work with him, you could never rehabilitate a man like this. This is somebody who's too far gone. It all leads up to that conclusion, doesn't it, Tom? Where, now this is the thing that I thought was a little bit ropey, in that, yes, he calls into the radio station now and again, but he doesn't have any real direct link to Dr. Gale. So I did find it a bit strange that all of a sudden he turns up at her house. And to me, that was contrived to try and link the two together finally, because there was no point where they really kind of intersected. You know, if he'd been sort of hanging around outside the studio, the radio station, maybe then. Although I'm saying that, I'm kind of catching myself, because I do remember that she doesn't get along with the lieutenant at first. But of course, as these things go, they end up sleeping together and becoming kind of an item. And he takes photographs of them out to dinner. So he is watching her, I guess. So, I don't know, maybe I should kind of roll back that criticism of it. In any case, the police are apparently patrolling and waiting for, in case he happens to turn up and is targeting her. And, of course, he breaks in and a big fight ensues.
Before we get to that, I think you're right. I'm not sure that the connective tissue of him speaking to the radio station actually meant much in the end, you know what I mean? And considering it's called Don't Answer the Phone, you know, I'm thinking of something like, I think it was the fourth Psycho movie where Norman was calling into a radio station as sort of like a confessional, and he kept calling in, you know, telling his story.
Yes.
So there seemed to be at least some point to it. Whereas this, it just seemed completely random. We don't really know why he does it, or, you know, what does he get from it, or, you know, so it seemed a bit loose, really. Maybe just a way of linking it to a cool title or something. I don't know. But yeah, if you were annoyed at the last ending, the way it seemed totally pointless, and, you know, what had happened meant nothing because of how that one ended, this one, I don't know, maybe this one redeems it a bit for you.
Well, in the sense that I'm not saying that I always want it to be that the big bad loses in the end, but I do find it a bit cheap where somebody's gone through all of these things, we think the killer is dead, and then they turn up at the end and actually they won the day, you know. Like, what was that movie, Superstition, with you remember, like, the slasher movie with the witch, and then the guy gets like a cross that he has to throw into a lake, and that gets rid of the witch, and the guy, at the end, I finally won, and then she suddenly, like, comes out of the the lake and drags him under, and that's the end of the movie. It's like, well, what's the point then? It's like, why did I sit through your fight against this person? If sometimes I don't mind when the big bad wins for a bit. If this is completely out of the realm of horror, but the end of Avengers Infinity War, the bad guy has won. And he's sitting there at the end of it. Thanos has won at the end of it. He's sitting there admiring his work as half of the world's population has died, and that's how that movie ends. So, sometimes it's okay to have that. But, yeah, it's. I don't think there's enough connective tissue there. I mean, there's more of, like, a serial killer ringing the phone in Black Christmas, and he was upstairs. And
that's it. And there was a point to it. There was a point to that happening, wasn't
there?
it?
Yeah, and he was menacing as well. He was perverted and menacing and weird. Yeah, but what it does culminate in is, Lieutenant McCabe manages to get in there and fight him. And they do he shoots him in the cock, Tom. So, which I think, do you think that they intentionally did that to kind of be like, okay, you're this misogynistic, awful person who's been horribly violent towards women. Boom, I've shot you in the cock. That's the thing that you were using that as a kind of tool of oppression and violence against women. Now we're going to shoot. I wonder if that was purposeful. But he, of course, falls down and seems to die from it. Nobody would enjoy that, Tom. I have to say, I wouldn't want it to happen to me. And but he does that thing, doesn't he, Tom? Where even though he's not supernatural, he gets up again.
Yeah, he breaks his handcuffs as well.
Is that an easy thing to do? I can't imagine that's an easy thing for anyone to do. But he breaks his handcuffs as well, gets up again, seems to be okay, and then I actually think it's quite a decent sort of ending shot, really, where he's basically McCabe just shoots him over and over again in the back, and he's sort of blood spewing out.
Empties his gun into him.
And then he falls into a swimming pool. And then, of course, McCabe has to have the last word, and he's like, "Adios, creep." And it's like, that in itself,
great last line, great line.
That in itself is like, it's like something out of Dirty Harry. That's like something Dirty Harry would say after he shot somebody in a pool. But I quite liked that ending part of it. What about you?
Yeah, I thought it was a good ending. And no comebacks from that. He doesn't crawl out of the pool and try and get anyone. He's just dead. So, yeah, I was happy with it.
And listen, Tom, he deserved to be dead, because what a terrible man. And it makes...
They should have pulled him out and shot him.
They should, shouldn't they? Yeah, and they should have let every woman in the area come up and give him a good kick, Because just a terrible... And the sad thing is, not to... be depressive or to be down or anything, but there are men, and there's some women as well, who are like this in the world. And it's, I read a lot of true crime and I listen to podcasts and things like that, and there are some awful things that happen to people, and I don't know why I listen to it, because it really depresses me that there are just so many bad people in the world. It's a very naive thing to say, I know, but this guy definitely deserves to go down. The question then becomes, Tom, to summarise all of this, how do we feel about the movie? And this is possibly one of the trickiest summaries that I would have to give. So I'll let you go first.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'm going to let the needle veer a bit more towards the positive than the negative, I do think it started to drag a little bit in the last half, but there was a lot I liked about it, the sort of skeezy, sleazy world of LA at that time. I think it was in LA, wasn't it?
Yes.
And, I liked the two cops, and, they were arseholes as well in their own way, and just the way that they worked, and there was a bit of a detective story. I mean, God, it wasn't the best, but it was just interesting to see these detectives sort of, pounding the streets and trying to find out what was going on. And, well, you know what? Nicholas Worth as Kirk Smith. Still can't say for sure what I think, but it was certainly interesting. So I'm going more towards the positive than the negative on this one.
Same. Yeah, I think that it's hard to deny that there are things about it that really work, and they do convey a sense of real dread, and there's a real grisly nature to it. Again, I kind of compare it to the New York Ripper, which was directed by Lucio Fulci, which is, it's very sleazy, nasty piece of work, really. And I feel like this is kind of similar. The difference is that Lucio Fulci, for all of his faults, he plays that movie really straight, but it just happens to have the ridiculousness of the killer speaking to people in a Donald Duck voice, which does offset it a bit. And I think this movie has quite a few scenes that offset the misery and the dread. But do you know what, Tom? I mean, it's one of the more interesting movies that we've seen on this list, I think. You know, it's all over the place, and it's an interesting watch, I think. I definitely... Would I watch it again? I don't know. I feel like it maybe, because it would be nice to know, you know, where the needle would veer if you saw it on another rewatch. Now that you're expecting the ridiculousness of Nicholas Worth, and it has to be said that really the movie gravitates towards him and is focused on him, and for better or worse, he is committed to it and he is giving it his all. Yeah. And I think in that respect, it is. I think it's probably quite good in places, and probably a bit offensively exploitative in other places. So it is, it's kind of, I don't know, 70-30, maybe 60-40 in favour of it, I think. It's probably where I'm at. And now, again, we're not doing trivia, but as I was doing the research for this, I did see one thing that I thought was hilarious, so I thought I would tell you about this movie. Flo Lawrence, who plays Dr. Lindsay Gale, and James Westmoreland, who plays Lieutenant Chris McCabe, they become lovers in the movie. They hated each other. Oh, right. So much so that when it came time to do the love scene that they have in the movie, I can't remember which one of them it was. It may have been both of them. They ate loads of onions before the scenes so that they would have stinky breath. Nice. So there you go. Now, I have to say, it didn't show on screen, you know. So, to be fair...
No, they did a good job.
That's actors doing a good job because, apparently they really didn't like each other. So, there you go. Don't answer the phone. I mean, do answer the phone. You'll probably be all right. You probably won't be a killer with a stocking and a coin. But just put your answering machine on. And then you'll know. Then you'll be able to filter it out, won't you? All right, well, Don't Answer the Phone was re-released by Vinegar Syndrome in 2017 on both DVD and Blu-ray. This reissue is readily available. It's region-free, so it can be played in the UK, and it was very well reviewed in terms of picture quality at Blu-ray.com, which is a website that I use quite a bit to look at how transfers of things or remasters of things are shaping up. And so this is readily available everywhere, really. And I think Vinegar Syndrome do good. I don't have this particular release, of course, but Vinegar Syndrome do good work. So, and it's fully, I believe the Vinegar Syndrome one is fully uncut as well, because that's another thing that I read about this movie. There was a lot cut out of it in the UK.
Wow, I can imagine.
And it's had various releases over the years that are they've cut this bit out, cut that bit out, or whatever. But I believe the Vinegar Syndrome one is fully uncut. So if you're interested in that, then there it is. Oh, Tom, is that the door again?
I can't believe we got another visitor tonight. Who could be at the door? I don't know. Do
you reckon it's Andrew with our Friday the 13th box sets? Maybe
it better be. It better be.
Okay, well, look, Tom, you answer it, because, again, I'm slightly afraid to.
Okay. Look who it is. It's Jim Moon. Jim.
Hey. Hello, folks. I thought I'd drop in and see how you're doing in the festive season.
Ah, how nice.
Thank you. It's nice in here.
It's not as nice as the Library of Dreams, 2 doors down, which, it's pretty nice gaff you got there, Jim.
Yeah. You dust more than I do, though.
That's me. I try and keep everything as neat as possible in here. We had a right old degenerate in here before you, Jim, a man by the name of Andrew Roberts. He was a right filthy sod.
Nasty pasty, I believe.
Yes, the nasty pasty himself. But I think that you'll be a much, just better guest, really.
A better class of guest, I think.
I was quite rude to him, though, wasn't I, Tom? I kicked him out into the cold. But he was telling us about a Friday the 13th box set, Jim. Because Tom and I are big fans of that, and it's one that was released in America. It's a very spiffy, nice box set, and of course, Tom and I can't afford it. We're destitute, We're pretty destitute, and he didn't bring copies for us.
Shocking. That is nasty.
It is, but hopefully, Jim, you can provide. What have you got for your boys?
Well, I brought you one of the most hotly anticipated releases that came out this year, which is the network DVD fully restored transfer of the long unavailable original Woman in Black.
Okay.
I have
For
been
years
dying
and
to
years,
see
I've had a
this.
copy, but it was one with an eye patch and a hook for a hand, and it came from eBay in a plain wrapper, and it was clearly just dubbed from a VHS copy. So the original Woman in Black, it was shown in 1989 on Christmas Eve on ITV, based on the Susan Hill novel. Terrified a generation who thought, oh, we'll have a nice, family-friendly ghost story, and got something from Nigel Neal that was brown trousers all round. So people were wringing out their strides and hanging them up along with the stockings. It had a brief release on Region 1 DVD, but it was owned by, I can't remember, Central or TVS, one of the old ITV regions. They went bust, and their back catalogue was acquired by an American company who were like a subsidiary of Disney. And hence all their output just went into this vault, and no one knew who owned the rights to what, where, and they weren't terribly helpful. And for years, people were saying, when will The Woman in Black come out on DVD? And people said, well, we don't know. We don't know where it is. We don't know who owns the rights. Susan Hill on her website actually put up a special page because she was sick to the back teeth of people asking, have you got a copy? No, I don't have one. We can't get one. The rights are all tied up. But then the rights did get untangled when Hammer did their version with Daniel Radcliffe a couple of years ago. And they obviously had to get the clearance to release their version onto home media. So that tidied things up a bit. The network DVD actually did some detective work and actually not only got the rights, but found the master, did a full restoration, and they released it in a lovely edition, which is kind of, it even resembles an old hardback book. It's got lots of lovely extras, including what's going to be part of my Christmas viewing, a commentary track from Kim Newman and Mark Gatiss. I have watched it, and the transfer is beautiful, because I've only seen it on this sort of hooky DVD copy we have. Well, we both have, because Teresa, she got one before she got together with me, so we've got two hooky Women in Black DVDs in the house now. But finally, we've got a proper one.
I've got to ask, Jim, because I know sometimes when you can't get something, when something isn't unavailable, it becomes legend, sometimes undeservedly. People just build things up and build things up. So how does it hold up? Is it, does it live up to the legend?
Oh, definitely. So I've had this hooky version where it's still, you get the power of it. And I was worried with the restored version, you might see the limitations. Because sometimes with things, especially if you're watching old video copies, that kind of blur and the grain and the bits of static and the wobbly bits around the edge sort of add to the ambience. It gives like the movie like a patina of age, and it feels a bit more, like something dusty and forbidden. However, this transfer, because it was all shot on film, no like video inserts for indoors like TV did back in the 80s, thankfully. And it looks gorgeous. It looks like it was filmed yesterday. And one of the great things in it, I could see lots of details of things that I hadn't spotted before, because there are all kinds of just little things in the background in particular, and kind of subtle bits of haunting I hadn't seen before, because the copy we had was frankly shite. So this is glorious. It looked far better than I was anticipating.
Well, I'd heard of this movie years and years ago, and had never had a chance to see it, because there were copies of it floating around the internet. They were probably quite bad quality rips, I would imagine. Probably VHS rips or something like that, maybe.
Yeah, a lot of off-air recordings just transferred to digital.
And then I heard that there was going to be a remake of it, and I thought, okay, it was strange. I'd heard it was a very creepy film. But, how scary can a TV movie be? Well, the truth of the matter is, there are some that are quite creepy. And they can sustain that level of fear, despite the fact that they've been on TV. And I heard there was going to be a remake by, of course, the revived Hammer Hammer Films. And I'd like to get your take on that, and then I want to ask you something about this new release. What do you think of the remake with Daniel Radcliffe? Because I did see that.
Well, I actually quite liked it. It's excuse me, it's a different take on the book, but The Woman in Black's a bit weird because it's a novel which was quite popular, but it really became a hot property with a stage adaptation that's still running. That started in the Fortune Theatre, and it's since toured the world, and it's still running, well, up until COVID, actually, and still touring, and undoubtedly after COVID it will. And that sort of jiggles the story a bit. And there's been a couple of radio versions, and they change bits as well. And so it's kind of, Hammer, I think quite wisely thought, we won't just do what Nigel Neal did for TV, because he had made his own changes as well, but he was very faithful to the book. And Jane Goldman, I think, came up with a good script and brought in a new angle that just puts a little bit of a spin on it. In many ways, it's a more modern horror movie. There's a lot more kind of the quiet, loud, jump out your seat sort of things. But, you know, I don't mind that as long as, you know, they don't overdo it, because it is kind of, it's a bit more of a ghost train of a movie, whereas the original TV version is a lot more sort of plays it straight. It's more like a drama that happens to be very, very frightening, creeps up on you. Whereas the Hammer version is kind of from the start, you're going, yep, this is a ghost story, and it looks gothic as hell. But, you know, I'm good with that. It's a style decision, and I enjoy both versions of it. You know, they've both got their merits. The 1900 one is the superior one, I think, because that's the one that really, the first time I saw it, actually, I had trouble getting to sleep. There's one really famous scene in it, which I won't spoil, which most people see it. That's the scene that comes back to them when you turn out the light.
Goodness me. I mean, I remember the image of the woman in black. I remember seeing a picture of her veiled in black, and I remember thinking, that is frightening. Just that image by itself is frightening. And I think the picture that I saw of her, this was years ago, before this release that you're talking about, you know, I think she was standing in the daylight, but it was still creepy. You know, it was still, a strong image can be effective no matter, you know, whether it's day or night, really.
Well, that's what I like about this version, is because a lot of it does take place in broad daylight. I mean, the picture you're talking about, it's a scene from a funeral, and she appears sat at the back of the church, and she just looks slightly off, and you only glimpse her for a moment. Then she stood outside against, you know, this really sort of brooding skyline with clouds and, you know, tumble down gravestones and sort of, you know, long grass sort of just moving in the wind. And it's really, really effective. And on this print, you really see the detail of the makeup on her face, and you realise kind of done a really good job, because the book describes her as kind of looking like someone who's been ill, and there's something not quite right, not quite deformed, but something gives you that sense. And the makeup job really nailed that. This kind of horrible pallor she has and sunken eyes, and it's kind of the detail you see in the new restoration is kind of really actually makes that scene even punchier, which was kind of like, whoa, got me again, you bastards.
So is it just the DVD, or are there Blu-rays as well?
It's Blu-ray as well. I mean, we went
it's Blu-ray, yeah,
the Blu-ray option. Just have it all in pin-sharp crikey vision. and a slightly smaller to store, which is an issue in the house.
I fancy that, you know. That sounds really good to me. It's a film I've wanted to see for a long time anyway, and I didn't really fancy downloading a very poor kind of, third or fourth generation copy of it off the internet, you know, somebody's ripped off the TV. I think it's really cool that people are going back and restoring these cult classics, you know. A film that perhaps wouldn't have now has a chance to have a bigger audience, I think, in the modern age. People are still really interested in retro horror. There's a lot of retro horror coming out. You only have to look at the labels, you know, Arrow Video, Vinegar Syndrome, all these labels. What they're pumping out is retro horror, horror of an older age, if you like, or a golden age of horror. So, yeah, it sounds really appealing to me. What about you, Tom?
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait to see it. I've been dying to see it. A friend of mine got a copy recently, and they really liked it. So yeah, I can't wait, Jim. I can't wait. And I don't think there's a better place to kind of hear about, especially this kind of vibe of horror, than your podcast, Jim, Hypnagoria. And I know that Christmas is always a bumper time for you. So what have you got planned for Christmas, mate?
Well, this Christmas, I've got a very big ghostly theme going on. again. But Christmas is the time for ghost stories. So kicking off the start of December, I've got an interview with a writer, Tom Burgess, who does these wonderful ghostly graphic novels. And he's just got a new book coming out called Early Haunts, where he retells in graphic novel format 4 seminal ghost stories that have influenced the whole genre. And that's very, very cool. I mean, that was a good chat. I'm also looking at 1980s BBC series, done for kids but quite scary, The Children of Green Know. About a boy. Yeah, it's about a boy who gets, his parents are away in Burma in like the 1930s, and he's at boarding school and he gets pensioned off kind of for Christmas to this relative he's never heard of, his great-grandmother. He's never met her before, and she lives in this strange old house called Green Know. And when he gets there, it's just him and Granny, and they got on famously, but there are other children in the house he can't always see. It's really creepy, but it's also really sort of magical and heartwarming. It's kind of halfway between The Box of Delights and Ghost Story for Christmas.
Yeah, you know why I remember it? Because I remember watching it when I was a kid, and on Christmas morning he wakes up and he's got a stocking, and I think he gets like a tangerine and like the smallest little toy out of it or something. And I was like, how can that be all he gets for Christmas? You know, pure childish thought to have, but it always stuck in my head for that reason.
You say that, Tom, but I think that's about all I'm going to be getting this Christmas. To be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'll be grateful for it. No, Jim, you're possibly the hardest working man in podcasting. I think you put out a lot of stuff, and it's always great quality, and people can hear as they hear this recording. If they've not heard it from you before, you've got that great voice. You lull the listener into a false sense of security, and then you strike. And it's always really fascinating. I'd like to ask you, before we let you go, you know, what got you interested in the idea of podcasting to begin with? Well,
basically, I found kind of podcasting kind of by accident. I used to go on a website in the early days called yogsophoth.com, which is a Lovecraft website. And they started doing a podcast, and that was the show that unlocked it for me. And at the time, I was doing a lot of sort of freelance artwork and design work. And I found listening to music often became a bit distracting, because you spent more time trying to find the right music to get the right mood for the picture or the design you're working on. And that was kind of getting counterproductive. But I found kind of spoken word and hearing people talking about geeky stuff was just kind of, that was just the ticket. It was perfect for what I was doing. And it was kind of, hearing fresh voices, finding out fresh stuff. And after a while, I started thinking, well, I wouldn't mind giving this a go. I always had this sort of fantasy about being a late night radio DJ, and, and big hello to all you truckers out there, and doing that kind of quiet, intimate show, and then ending up haunted by ghosts, because that's what always happens in things I've seen about radio DJs. And so I started sending in feedback to a few podcasts, and then just sort of plucked the courage, thought, well, I'll put something out myself. I thought, no one will listen. And 10 years later, I'm doing 3 different shows and something like 14 podcasts a month, plus guesting on other ones as well on a regular basis.
So I'm quite sure, Jim, that you were around about the time that I got started.
Was your show, the Go Boy Radio Show, was what kind of swung it for me to think, because all the podcasts I listened to were always like, at least a few people talking, and there was very few where it was just a solo host. And so it was kind of your show. So I thought, no, you can do this on your own. That, and Danny Davis is a disappointment as well. It was kind of like, oh, no, it can be done. Because I was talking to a good friend of mine, Gordon, about doing a podcast. But Gordon's kind of quite busy, and he goes to a lot of gigs. He travels around the country all the time. Partly for his work, he's half the time on the other side of the country. And so scheduling would be an issue, and I knew you had to be regular, so that's why I went it alone. But say the Go Boy Radio Show, that was kind of like, yes, it can be done. It can be done. I don't need to try and clone myself or something, or have a sock puppet to talk to.
You probably listened to it and thought, well, it doesn't need to be 3 hours long. It could be cut down and made accessible. Was that what you were thinking at the time?
Well, no, it was more. I was thinking kind of like, God, Christ, will I manage to get a 10-minute show out? And because that was the golden era of podcasts, where it was, you go big or you go long or you go home. It was kind of, it was all.
It really was.
It was all 3-hour shows back then. Now it's kind of, oh no, your show's got to be about 15 minutes long, and 15 minutes of it should be jingles and adverts as well. Apparently, kind of.
Yeah, it's the landscape of podcasting has changed so much. From when I began, even before that. The reason I did shows that were so long was because people were going to work and they were having commutes, and it was like, well, that's going to be your soundtrack to your commute. I couldn't imagine doing a 3-hour podcast now, but like you say, things have just changed so much. One of the things I really like about your shows is that you do have things relatively concise and you layer everything in, but you're not. It's not an epic listen. It's quite accessible, I think. So anybody who's listening to this who's never heard Jim's stuff, Hypnagoria, it's and as Tom said, the Library of Dreams. It's just there's a real atmosphere to it and a real professionalism and a classiness to it that I think is quite rare in podcasting. Certainly in my podcasting.
Oh, thank you. It's one of those things I just I like the idea of radio, that you can make a whole kind of little world of your own, and that's kind of what I've done now, really. And I'm sort of planning to do a 4th podcast, but for no good reason other than I can. But because a lot of people say, your voice is very relaxing, and over the years I've had a lot of problem with depression and anxiety and insomnia, and it's kind of my midlife crisis was to learn to play synthesizers, and I want to do kind of an ambient podcast for insomniacs, where it's just kind of very, very odd elliptical stories and lots of ambient synth noodling.
I like that. I like the sound of that.
No.
Are you going to be joining Emerson, Lake and Palmer and that sort of thing? Joining a prog rock band?
I think I'm turning into a prog rock band all on my own. I'm sort of been rearranging my desk and sort of thinking, right, where can I build racks and get more keyboards up? And it's kind of, I've got too many wires in my life. But, I want a modular synthesizer, which means lots of wires to plug in like a big old telephone exchange to make weird noises. But
sounds interesting. So you're getting into sort of sound designy stuff,
Well, that's it. I thought I justified sort of buying a synthesizer and kind of, I can use it for the podcast. It's sort of a work thing. And as it's turned out, it has really opened the doors, and I put a fresh spin on the shows. I mean, the show I started this year, I always did readings of horror stories on my main show, but this year I thought I'd actually hive them off into their own show. And for that, it means every story has its own little theme to begin. Just very short, 30, 40 seconds, little sort of intro, sort of motif music, and then a longer ambient piece at the end. And that's been really fun, just to... It makes me actually learn to use the damn instruments and learn music and push myself to do something a bit different every time. So
there you go. So, Chris, you got to get your old banjo out and start plucking away at it.
Well, haven't I, Tom? And I've got to really step it up with you two around. It's there's not much room. I feel sad that we're going to have to let this guy go, Tom. Really?
I know. It's been lovely. It's been lovely.
Unlike Andrew, I don't feel like kicking him out. I feel like he belongs. Yes, and he's brought us a copy of the Women in Black. Well, me and Tom are going to have a cuddle, I think, and watch that. And thank you so much, Jim. It's really fascinating to hear your take on things, and I'll definitely be checking out that Blu-ray because that sounds wonderful to me. And we wish you a Merry Christmas, of course.
Indeed, and a Merry Christmas to you and all you lovely people out there in listener land. And thank you for having me on this show. This has been a bit of a dream come true for me to chat to you guys. So that's been lovely.
Thank you so much for listening to this bollocks, because somebody has to. And we've got our only 2 listeners left guesting on this show, Tom. It's a wonderful thing, actually.
Absolutely. Jim, I mean, God, I've known you for a decade, but we've never actually done this, and I'm sorry it's been so long to actually do it, to sit down and have a chat with you. So thanks so much for dropping by, man.
Absolute pleasure. It's been an absolute blast.
See you later then, Jim.
Bye,
Take
Jim.
care, mate.
Do you know what? I really enjoyed that, Tom. I really enjoyed having Jim. And do you know what? Andrew as well. It was nice to have guests.
I know.
It was nice to have guests.
It was. Jim is a podcasting legend as far as I'm concerned, and a good man, and I've known him for like over a decade, but it's always been in, messages or tweets or, things like that. I've never actually sat down and spoke to him, so I'm glad he came by. And Andrew as well, what a lovely family.
Andrew's been kicking around for a lot. He's like a vampire, he's just been there for such a long time. Ready to suck. No? All right, well, look, Tom, I've really enjoyed our time together here. Thank you very much for all of that. I just want to say to all of you listening out there, look, it's been a hard year. Let's be honest about it. For many people, including myself, maybe the worst year of their lives, certainly one of them. What I can say is that I'm glad to still be here. And I'm glad you're here, Tom. And I'm glad that any of you out there who are listening are still here, still with us. And it looks like, at the time of recording, that maybe there's some hope in the future in terms of vaccines and things like that might be able to get us out of this mess. Maybe the world will be changed forever. I would like to think their attitudes certainly will be changed, and I hope really one of the things that I can say to you folks out there, and I know that I'm feeling this way as well, I imagine, Tom, you're probably feeling the same, is that it might change our attitudes really surrounding what we feel is important in the world. And that there are so many petty things that we worry about. And at the end of the day, what's important really is that you have love around you, and that you have, people who love and support you. Hold them close, hold them tightly. Be responsible. Wear your bloody mask when you need to. Have your vaccination when you need to. And let's try and rebuild the world. And I know that we can do it. Not me and you, Tom. There's not a lot we can really do, but we can be there on the fringes of it and keep doing this show whenever we can. I know you've waited a long time for this show to come, but we're not operating on any particular schedule right now. But we are so close to the end of this, aren't we, Tom?
Who'd have thought we'd ever get there, but we are.
We're so close to it. And, of course, we've already told you that we're going to continue afterwards, and we're going to get onto the Creep Show franchise. We're about season 3 of the Creep Show television show by then. But yes, so Tom, this was episode 39. On episode 40, what are we talking about there?
Well, this one I'm actually quite looking forward to. It is a theme of witches, and one of the films is The Demons by Jess Franco. I know he's got a bit of a kicking on the show before, and the other one is Mark of the Devil. I'm quite looking forward to this one, Chris. I like the sound of this.
Yeah, I think I own Mark of the Devil on Blu-ray. Arrow have those sales where they just knock a load of stuff down for really cheap, and I remember buying a bunch of times. And I think I might have the Blu-ray of that. Maybe I got rid of it, I don't know. But I'm also thinking, Tom, that I think that's our penultimate episode.
It is. It is. Who'd have thought?
I know. So listen, we'll tell you about what's going to be on the final episode on that one. But hey, listen, I think it's time for me to toddle off back to my own house, my little hovel, and I'm going to wrap up warm in there. Think about, what was his name? Norman Worth. What was he? Nicholas Worth. I'm going to think about Nicholas Worth, try and make up my mind. And Tom, thank you for inviting me in once again.
You're always welcome, my friend. Always welcome.
Are you going to get pissed?
You know it. It's 11 o'clock in the morning, so I'm gonna get pissed.
Okay,
right
that's it. Can I have this quiche?
It's all yours, mate. It's all yours.
Oh, lovely. All right. Well, listen, folks. We're gonna go take that. Tom's gonna give me a nice plastic container, and I'm gonna take some quiche, and I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna eat that quiche, and I'll go to bed and I'm gonna have a bloody good sleep. I'll tell you that much. Tom, Merry Christmas to you, old boy.
Merry Christmas to you, my friend. I know it's been a tough year for you, and I don't want to harp on about that, but I know that the audience of the show and myself appreciate that you're still here and you're still entertaining us. You're making us laugh. You're making us think, and the Strange and Deadly show wouldn't be the same without you, and the world wouldn't be the same without you. So, thanks for coming on, man.
Well, thank you, my friend. Yes, it's been the worst year of my life, but through that, hopefully you can overcome it and hopefully next year will be better. When you say the audience of the show, Tom, do you mean the 2 people who came through this door earlier on? Because those are the only 2 left, aren't they? But I know they wish me well as well, so that's great. Thank you very much, my friend, and hey, let's see what 2021 brings us. Hopefully it's a much better and happier time for everybody, eh?
Absolutely.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas. Bye for now. As the police chase the evidence, the bodies mount up, and Smith's psychosis reaches boiling point as he begins stalking the terrific Dr. Gale.
Sorry, the terrified Dr. Gale. Sorry. It's so bad.
Terrific Dr.
He's terrific.
She really is terrific. Terrific Dr. Gale. Sorry, mate.
It's all right.
It's been a while since.
I'm glad my total spelling mistake has generated such laughter.
As he begins stalking the terrified Dr. Gale.
Do that again.
As he begins stalking the Just leave me with it. I'll just keep going.
Go
It's
on.
fine. As he begins stalking the terrified.
Oh dear.
As he begins. As he begins. Okay. Come on. As he begins stalking the petrified Dr. Gale, leading up.
Go on. Do it again. You'll get it this time.
No, that was fine. I'll cut it after Dr. Gale. Leading up to a very bloody conclusion.